The Hollow did not give them time to rest. 3 days after the battle at Thera Nebula, sensors detected the darkness moving again. It was not heading toward the fleet. It was not seeking revenge on the ships that had wounded it. It was going straight for Earth. Thera was on the bridge when the report came through. She watched the human crew receive the news with faces that went pale and hard. Their home was under attack. Everything they loved was in danger. Daniel studied the tactical projections in silence. The Hollow was moving fast, faster than it had ever traveled before. It would reach Earth in 4 days. The fleet, damaged and scattered, could not intercept it in time. "We have to try," Maya said. Her voice was tight with fear she was barely controlling. "We will die before we reach it," Kevin replied quietly. "Our ships are too damaged. We cannot match its speed." Daniel closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, Tyra saw something she had not seen before. Absolute determination mixed with absolute acceptance. "The Endurance can make the jump," he said. "If Rosa pushes the engines beyond safe limits, we can get ahead of the Hollow." Kevin shook his head. "Captain, the ship will not survive that kind of stress. We barely survived the last battle." "I know," Daniel replied. "But we do not need to survive. We need to slow it down." The bridge went silent. Everyone understood what he was saying. The Endurance would sacrifice itself to buy time for Earth to prepare its defenses. Rosa's voice came through the intercom. She had been listening from engineering. "I can do it, Captain. I can get us there." But Kevin is right. The ship will not last long after we arrive. How long? Maybe 18 hours of combat operations. Maybe less. That will have to be enough. Daniel looked around at his crew. "I am not ordering anyone to stay. This is a volunteer mission. Anyone who wants to evacuate to another ship can do so now." No one moved. No one spoke. But their answer was clear in their eyes. Thera stepped forward. "I'm staying as well." Daniel looked at her with surprise. "Commander, this is not your fight. Your people need you to survive and report what happened here." "My people abandoned you once," Tyra replied. "I will not repeat that mistake." She straightened her posture and met his eyes directly. "I am staying." Something passed between them. Respect and gratitude and something that might have been friendship. "Very well," Daniel said. "All hands, prepare for emergency jump. We move in 1 hour." The Endurance separated from the fleet and jumped ahead of the Hollow. Rosa pushed the engines beyond every limit ever designed. The ship groaned and screamed but held together through sheer determination. They emerged from faster-than-light travel directly in the Hollow's path. Earth was 3 star systems behind them. The darkness stretched before them like an endless night. The battle began immediately. The Endurance threw everything it had at the Hollow. Missiles and beams and projectiles struck the creature's wounded center. The darkness recoiled and lashed out with terrible fury. For 18 hours, they fought a running battle across 3 star systems. The ship took damage that should have destroyed it 100 times over. Systems failed and were repaired and failed again. Crew members collapsed from exhaustion and were replaced by others who could barely stand. Rosa held the engines, together with literal determination and constant singing. Kevin found firing solutions even when the weapons barely functioned. Maya coordinated defenses while bleeding from wounds she refused to let anyone treat. Daniel stood at the center of it all. He gave orders and made decisions and kept his crew fighting long past the point where any rational commander would have surrendered. Thara fought beside them. She manned stations when crew members fell. She helped repair damage with her own hands. She became part of the ship in a way she had never experienced before. On the 18th hour, Earth's defense fleet arrived. Every ship that could fly had come. They brought reinforcements from every Confederate world that had seen the broadcasts of the Thyran Nebula battle. The galaxy had united at last. The Hollow, weakened by its relentless pursuit and the Endurance's constant attacks, faced an enemy it could not defeat. The combined fleet struck from every direction with the chaotic tactics humans had taught them. The darkness thrashed and fought, but could not escape Dot in the final moments of the battle. Thyra saw something she would remember for the rest of her life. The Hollow reached for Earth one last time. A tendril of absolute darkness stretched toward the blue and green world that humans called home. Daniel gave his final order. All power to forward weapons. Target the tendril. Fire everything. The Endurance unleashed every remaining weapon. The beam of energy struck the tendril and shattered it. The Hollow screamed, if such a thing could scream. Its form collapsed in on itself. Light returned to the space it had occupied. The darkness that had terrorized the galaxy for 3 centuries was gone. The Endurance drifted in space, barely functional. Its hull was torn open in dozens of places. Its systems were failing. Its crew was exhausted beyond measure. But they had won. Thyra found Daniel on the bridge. He was slumped in his command chair, with blood running from wounds he had ignored for hours. Debris had struck him during the final attack. He was barely conscious. She knelt beside him and took his hand. "We did it," she said softly. "The Hollow is destroyed." Daniel smiled weakly. "How is the crew?" "They are alive." "Because of you." He closed his eyes. "Good. That is all that matters." Medical teams from other ships arrived and took Daniel and the other wounded crew members for treatment. Thyra stayed on the bridge and watched Earth grow larger in the view screen as rescue ships towed the Endurance home. 1 week later, she stood before the Galactic Council. The same chamber where she had received her mission was now filled with representatives from every known species. They had come to hear her report. Thyra spoke for 3 hours. She told them everything. The chaos and the courage and the sacrifice. She described humans who laughed before battle and cried after victory. She explained how they fought not for glory or conquest, but for the simple belief that some things were worth protecting. When she finished, High Chancellor Morth rose from his seat. His voice carried the weight of centuries of fear and prejudice. "What do you recommend we do about the humans?" Thyra looked at him calmly. "End the quarantine. Welcome them as equals. Learn from them. Because what they showed us is not weakness or savagery. It is the best of what any species can become." The council voted unanimously to lift the quarantine. Earth would take its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as guardians. The species that had once terrified the galaxy had become its greatest hope. Daniel recovered slowly. The wounds from the final battle left scars that would never fade. But he returned to duty and received command of a new flagship being built in Earth's orbital shipyards. Maya was promoted to captain and given her own vessel. Rosa stayed with the Endurance, overseeing its reconstruction. Kevin became an instructor, teaching chaotic tactics to fleets across the Confederacy. Vosk returned to his homeworld as a hero. He told stories of humans and their strange ways. He taught young warriors that strength came not from muscles but from heart. Thyra accepted a position as the first Valorian ambassador to Earth. She lived in a small house near the ocean and spent her days building connections between species that had once been enemies. Sometimes Daniel visited her there. They would walk along the beach and talk about the future. He never spoke of the battle as a victory. He spoke of it as a beginning. One evening, as the sun set over the water, Thyra asked him the question that had haunted her since they first met. "Why did you really help us? After everything we did to your people?" Daniel watched the waves for a long moment. Then he spoke words that she would carry with her forever. "Because hate is heavy, and we were tired of carrying it. Because fear builds walls, and we wanted to build bridges. Because the universe is dark and cold, and the only way to survive is to bring light wherever we go. He looked at her with those steady eyes that had faced the end of everything and refused to blink. "Some things are worth protecting," he said, "regardless of who asks, regardless of what it costs. That is what it means to be human." Thyra stood beside him and watched the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Each point of light represented a world that would continue to exist, because humans had chosen to fight for strangers. She thought about everything she had witnessed: the chaos and the courage, the laughter and the sacrifice, the stubborn, unreasonable hope that had saved the galaxy. "I think I understand now," she said quietly. Daniel smiled. "Do you?" Thyra nodded slowly. To be human is to love without limits, to hope without reason, to fight for what matters even when victory seems impossible. She looked at the man beside her. Scarred and tired and still standing. "It is to be the light when everything else is darkness." Daniel took her hand gently. "Welcome to the family," he said. Above them, the stars burned on forever. And somewhere among them, new stories were beginning. Stories of humans and aliens working together. Stories of hope spreading across the galaxy. Stories of darkness defeated by nothing more than stubborn, unreasonable love. The universe would never be the same. And that was exactly how it should be. The battle began with silence. Thyra had witnessed many fleet actions during her military career. They always started the same way. Commanders issued orders. Ships moved into formation. Weapons charged in synchronized patterns. Everything proceeded according to carefully designed plans. The human attack had no plan. Daniel gave a single command: "Go." The fleet scattered like leaves in a storm. Ships flew in every direction without coordination or pattern. Some dove straight toward the hollow. Others circled wide around its edges. A few actually flew away before curving back in unexpected arcs. Thyra gripped her console and tried to make sense of the chaos. Her military training screamed that this was wrong. Fleets needed order. Battles needed strategy. This was madness. But the hollow hesitated. Its tendrils reached for the approaching ships and found nothing where it expected targets to be. It adapted and reached again and missed again. For 3 centuries, it had devoured orderly fleets with ease. It had learned every tactical pattern and every evasion technique. It knew how rational species fought. It did not know how to fight humans. The first weapons struck the hollow's core. Missiles and energy beams and projectiles hit from angles that made no logical sense. The darkness shuddered. For the first time in recorded history, it felt pain. "Direct hit," Kevin reported from his station. "Multiple impacts on the central mass. It is taking damage." The bridge erupted in cheers. Thyra found herself shouting along with the humans despite her confusion. They were hurting it. They were actually hurting the enemy that had destroyed thousands of worlds. The hollow recovered and fought back. Tendrils swept through space with terrible speed. Ships vanished in bursts of nothingness. Confederate vessels died alongside human ones. The chaos that protected them also made coordination impossible. Daniel stood at the center of the bridge and watched his people die. His face showed pain but not hesitation. He had known this would happen. He had accepted the cost before the battle began. "All ships continue attack," he ordered. "Do not stop. Do not slow down. Make it bleed." The Endurance dove into the heart of the fight. Rosa pushed the engines beyond their design limits. The ship groaned and shook as it twisted through maneuvers that should have torn it apart. Weapons fired in random patterns. Shields flickered and failed and came back online. Thyra had never experienced combat like this. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely insane. She understood now why humans had frightened the galaxy so badly. They fought as if death was merely an inconvenience rather than an ending. A tendril swept across the Endurance's bow. The ship shuddered violently. Consoles exploded. Crew members were thrown from their stations. Alarms screamed through every corridor. Hull breach on deck 7 and 8, Maya reported. Shields at 20%. Weapons offline on starboard side. Daniel did not hesitate. Seal the breach. Reroute power to remaining weapons. Keep us in the fight. Rosa's voice came through the intercom from engineering. Captain, the main power coupling is failing. If it goes, we lose everything. Can you fix it? Already working on it. Give me 10 minutes. You have 5. Thyra watched the engineering feeds on her console. Rosa and her team worked with desperate speed. They welded conduits and rerouted power and held failing systems together with nothing but skill and determination. Rosa was actually singing while she worked. Her voice carried through the engineering bay, keeping her team calm while the ship fell apart around them. The Hollow concentrated its attack on the human ships. It had recognized them as the source of the chaos. It wanted them dead more than anything else in the galaxy. The Endurance took hit after hit. Systems failed throughout the ship. Crew members died at their stations and were replaced by others who kept fighting. The bridge filled with smoke and sparks and the sound of damage alarms. Daniel ordered evacuation of non-essential sections. He redirected everyone who could hold a weapon to defensive positions. He prepared his crew for the possibility that they would have to fight hand-to-hand if the ship was boarded by whatever lived inside the Hollow. Thura moved to stand beside him. She had no duties on a human ship, but she could not simply watch anymore. What can I do? She asked. Daniel looked at her with something like gratitude. Help Maya coordinate the defensive teams. Your tactical experience could save lives. Thera nodded and moved to Maya's station. Together they organized the ship's defense while the battle raged outside. They sent teams to secure critical sections and prepared fallback positions if the hull was breached again. Through it all, the Endurance kept fighting. Rosa kept the engines running through damage that should have destroyed them twice over. Kevin found new firing solutions even as weapons went offline. Every crew member did their job with focused determination. And slowly, impossibly, the Hollow began to weaken. The darkness contracted. Its tendrils moved slower. Its attacks became less coordinated. The chaos of the human assault was working. It was drowning in unpredictability. The Confederate ships that had joined the attack fought with renewed courage. Vosk led his Kethrani squadron in a devastating run through the Hollow's center. He flew with the randomness Kevin had taught him, spinning and diving in patterns that made no sense but kept him alive. Other alien captains followed his example. They abandoned their training and embraced the chaos. They fought like humans because humans were winning. Thyra finally understood what made this species so terrifying and so wonderful. They did not fight to survive. They fought to protect. Every human on this ship was willing to die so that others might live. It was not savagery or insanity. It was love given the form of violence. The Hollow made a final, desperate attack. It gathered all its remaining power and struck at the Endurance with everything it had. The ship screamed. Metal twisted and shattered. The bridge went dark for a terrible moment. Thyra felt herself thrown to the floor. Bodies fell around her. Someone was shouting orders through the chaos. Then Rosa's voice cut through the noise, somehow still singing. The lights flickered back on. The engines roared with renewed power. She had done it. She had saved the ship. Daniel pulled himself up from the deck. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead, but he ignored it completely. He looked around at his wounded bridge crew and spoke with quiet pride. Status. Report. Kevin wiped blood from his eyes and checked his console. The Hollow is retreating. It is actually retreating. The tactical display confirmed it. The darkness was pulling back. It was wounded and confused and doing something it had never done in 300 years. It was running away. The fleet regrouped around the Endurance. Ships that had survived gathered together in a ragged formation. They had lost nearly half their number, but they had won something far more important than survival. They had won hope. Maya slumped in her chair, with exhaustion, but managed to smile. "We did it. We actually heard it. We heard it," Daniel agreed. "But we did not kill it. And it will be back." He looked out at the stars where the hollow had fled. His expression was not triumphant. It was thoughtful and concerned. "We need to find a way to finish this," he said quietly. "Before it learns from what happened today." Thyra stood beside him and looked at the same stars. She thought about everything she had witnessed. The chaos and the courage and the sacrifice. "Your people voted to stay," she said. "When you ordered evacuation, they voted to stay with the ship." Daniel nodded. "They always do. Why?" "Because we do not leave family behind." He looked at her with tired eyes. "And everyone on this ship is family." Thyra felt tears forming in her eyes for the first time in decades. She blinked them away quickly. "I think I understand now," she said. "I think I finally understand what makes humans different." Daniel smiled softly. "We are not different. We just refuse to give up. Even when we should. Especially when we should," Thyra replied. The fleet limped towards safe space to repair and recover. Behind them, the hollow nursed its wounds in the darkness between stars. Both sides knew this was not over. But for the first time in 300 years, the outcome was no longer certain. And across the galaxy, species that had given up hope began to believe again. The Thyran Nebula was beautiful in the way that dangerous things are often beautiful. Clouds of gas and dust glowed with colors that had no names in any language. Stars burned within the haze like jewels scattered across velvet. It would have been a perfect place for peaceful exploration. Instead, it was the place where the hollow waited. Thyra stood on the bridge of the Endurance and watched the combined fleet take position. 50 human ships flew alongside 30 Confederate vessels. It was the largest force assembled since the hollow first appeared 3 centuries ago. It was also probably not enough. The darkness appeared at the edge of the nebula. It did not move like a ship or a creature. It simply existed, spreading across space like ink poured into water. Light died where it touched. Sensors failed. Communication became static and whispers. Thyra had seen recordings of the hollow. Nothing had prepared her for the reality. Looking at it made her mind want to stop working. Her eyes told her there was nothing there, but her soul screamed that something was watching. 3 Confederate ships broke formation. Their captains must have panicked at the sight. They fled toward the edge of the nebula, engines burning bright with desperate speed. The hollow reached for them. Tendrils of darkness extended faster than light. The ships did not explode or break apart. They simply stopped existing. One moment they were there. The next moment they were memories. "Don't hold formation," Daniel commanded. His voice was calm but firm. "Do not let fear make your decisions." The fleet steadied. Thyra noticed that the human ships had not wavered at all. They had seen their death approach and had chosen to face it rather than run. Daniel turned to Kevin at the tactical station. "We need information. I am sending a squadron forward." Kevin nodded and began selecting pilots. Thyra watched him choose volunteers for a mission that would likely kill them. Every pilot he asked said yes without hesitation. Lieutenant Chris Taylor was the squadron leader. He was young with red hair and a smile that never seemed to fade. He approached Daniel and saluted with easy confidence. "We will get you what you need, Captain." Daniel clasped his shoulder. "Come back if you can. I will do my best," Chris replied. "But if I do not, tell Rosa her stew still needs more salt." He left the bridge laughing. Thyra could not understand how someone could joke while walking toward death. But she was beginning to realize that humor was how humans processed fear. They laughed because crying would not help them fight. The squadron launched into the nebula. Thyra watched their signals on the tactical display. 12 small lights moving toward an infinite darkness. The Hollow responded to their approach. Tendrils reached out and swept through their formation. 3 ships vanished instantly. 2 more collided, trying to avoid the attack. The remaining 7 scattered in random directions. Chris Taylor flew like a madman. His ship twisted and rolled in patterns that should have torn it apart. He dove into the Hollow's tendrils and emerged on the other side. He fired weapons that did nothing and then reversed course without warning. The Hollow reached for him and missed. It reached again and missed again. Something about his movement confused it. Something about his chaos made it hesitate. Kevin leaned forward at his station. "Captain, are you seeing this?" Daniel nodded slowly. "It cannot predict him. He is flying without logic, because there is no logic," Maya said. "He is following his instincts. Pure human instinct." The surviving ships regrouped and returned to the fleet. Chris brought them home with 4 of the original 12. 8 pilots had died, but they had learned something that no one else had discovered in 300 years. The Hollow could be confused. It could be surprised. It could make mistakes. Chris arrived on the bridge, still breathing hard from the fight. He uploaded his sensor data to the main display and grinned at the gathered officers. "It learns," he reported. "Every time I did something, it adapted. But when I did something random, something that made no sense, it froze. Just for a moment, but that moment was enough." Thera stared at the data. Confederate tactical doctrine was built on logic and prediction. Every species in the Confederacy fought the same way. They analyzed the enemy, developed strategies, and executed plans with precision. The Hollow had faced logical opponents for 3 centuries. It had learned to counter every rational strategy. But chaos was outside its experience. Randomness was something it could not process. Daniel stood at the center of the bridge with his hands clasped behind his back. He studied the data for a long moment. Then he turned to face the communication station. "Open a channel to all fleet commanders," he ordered. The channel opened. Confederate commanders appeared on displays around the bridge. They looked shaken by what they had witnessed. "We have found a weakness," Daniel announced. "The Hollow cannot predict random behavior. Our strategy will be simple. We attack with no coordination, no patterns, no logic. Every ship follows its own instincts." Admiral Catherine's scales rippled with disbelief. "That is not strategy. That is suicide. Strategy has failed for 300 years, Daniel replied calmly. "Maybe it is time to try something else," the Confederacy commanders argued. They called the plan insane. They said it violated every principle of military science. They demanded that Daniel present a real strategy with proper formations and coordinated attacks. Daniel listened to their objections without emotion. When they finished, he spoke simply. "The human fleet will attack at dawn tomorrow. We will use our plan. Any ship that wishes to join us may do so. Any ship that wishes to retreat may leave with our gratitude." He closed the channel before they could respond. Thyra expected the bridge to fill with tension. Instead, the crew continued their work with quiet determination. Maya began plotting attack vectors that made no logical sense. Kevin started programming random pattern generators for the weapon systems. Rosa called from engineering to report that the engines were ready for anything. "You knew they would refuse," Thyra said to Daniel. He nodded. "And I knew some would change their minds. What if none of them do? Then we fight alone." He looked at her with those steady eyes. "We did not come here expecting help, Commander. We came because it was the right thing to do." That night, Thyra could not sleep. She walked the corridors of the Endurance and listened to humans preparing for battle. They were not celebrating anymore. They were quiet and focused. But she did not see fear in their eyes. She saw determination. Near midnight, a communication came through from the fleet. One Confederate captain was volunteering to join the human attack. Then another. Then a dozen more. Vosk appeared on the command channel. His Kathrani squadron would follow Kevin Park into battle. He had learned something on the training deck that he could not forget. By morning, half the Confederate fleet had broken from their commanders and pledged themselves to the human plan. They would fly into chaos together. They would face the darkness with instinct instead of logic. Daniel gathered his bridge crew and spoke quietly. We do not know if this will work. We do not know if any of us will survive. But we know that doing nothing means dying slowly. So we choose to fight. He looked around at their faces and smiled. It has been an honor serving with each of you. Now let us go make history. The fleet moved toward the hollow. Thyra stood at her station and watched the darkness grow larger. Beside her, humans prepared for battle with jokes and laughter and songs. Tomorrow, they would face an enemy that had destroyed everything it touched. Tomorrow they would fight without rules or order or predictable patterns. Tomorrow they would teach the universe that chaos could be a weapon, and perhaps, for the first time in 300 years, the darkness would learn to be afraid. Commander Thyra Velsan stood before the massive window of the council chamber and watched another star disappear from the sky. The light blinked once and then it was gone forever. Somewhere in that distant system, billions of lives had just ended. The Hollow had claimed another world. She turned to face the 12 representatives of the Valorian Confederacy. Their faces showed the same exhaustion she felt in her bones. 300 years of fighting. 300 years of losing. Every fleet destroyed. Every weapon useless. Every strategy a failure. The Hollow was not an enemy they could understand. It was darkness given form. It consumed light and matter and life itself. No one knew where it came from or what it wanted. They only knew that it would not stop until the entire galaxy was empty. High Chancellor Morath raised his three-fingered hand for silence. His blue skin had grown pale with age and worry. He spoke in a voice heavy with shame. We have no choice remaining. We must contact the humans. The chamber erupted in protest. Thera watched her fellow officers shake their heads in disgust. The humans were savages. Everyone knew the stories. 200 years ago, humanity had burst onto the galactic stage with violence and fury. They had fought 3 wars in their first decade of contact. They had killed millions. The Confederacy had quarantined their entire solar system to protect the galaxy from their madness. Thyra had studied the human wars at the military academy. She had seen the recordings of human soldiers charging into battle against superior forces. She had watched them fight long after any rational species would have surrendered. Her instructors had called it insanity. They had called it the reason humans could never be trusted. But now the Confederacy was dying, and the humans were still alive behind their quarantine barrier, growing stronger with each passing year. "You cannot be serious," said Admiral Kethron. His scales rippled with anger. "The humans will destroy us faster than the Hollow ever could." "The Hollow will destroy us within 50 years, Marth replied. "The humans might give us a chance to survive." Thyra stepped forward. She did not know why she spoke. Perhaps it was desperation. Perhaps it was curiosity about the species that had terrified the galaxy for 2 centuries. "I will go," she said. "I will deliver our message to Earth." The Council accepted her offer with obvious relief. No one else wanted the mission. No one else wanted to be the first to look humans in the eye since the quarantine began. Thyra traveled for 3 weeks through empty space. She passed the wreckage of dead fleets and silent worlds. She saw the Hollow's path carved across the stars like a wound that would never heal. By the time she reached the quarantine barrier, she had stopped caring about the danger. What could humans do to her that was worse than what she had already seen? The barrier opened to let her ship through. She expected to find a ruined world on the other side. The old record said humans had nearly destroyed their own planet before they reached the stars. Surely 200 years of isolation had made things worse. Instead, she found something that made her stop breathing. Earth was beautiful. The blue and green planet hung in space like a jewel. Ships moved around it in organized patterns. Stations orbited in perfect formation. The humans had not declined in isolation. They had thrived. A voice crackled through her communication system. It was speaking the common galactic language with a strange accent. Valorian vessel, this is Earth Defense Command. State your purpose. Tyra swallowed her fear. I am Commander Thera Velsan of the Valorian Confederacy. I come with a request from the Galactic Council. There was a long pause. Then the voice returned with something that might have been amusement. The same council that locked us away for 200 years? This should be interesting. You are cleared to land at New Geneva Spaceport. Do not deviate from your assigned course. Thyra landed her ship on a platform surrounded by human soldiers. They wore armor that looked primitive compared to Confederacy standards, but they carried themselves with a confidence that made her nervous. She had fought many species in her career. She knew dangerous warriors when she saw them. 2 officers approached her ship. One was a tall male with brown skin and kind eyes. The other was a shorter female with dark hair pulled back from her face. They wore simple uniforms with few decorations. The male spoke first. Commander Velsan. I am Captain Daniel Cooper. This is Lieutenant Maya Santos. Welcome to Earth. Thyra studied them carefully. They did not look like monsters. They looked tired and curious and strangely welcoming. Thank you, she managed. I bring grave news. She told them everything. She spoke about the Hollow and its endless hunger. She described the fallen worlds and destroyed fleets. She explained that the Confederacy had exhausted every option and lost every battle. She admitted that they had come to humanity because they had nowhere else to turn. Daniel and Maya listened without interrupting. Their faces showed no anger at the species that had imprisoned them. They only showed concern for the suffering Thyra described. When she finished, Daniel looked at Maya. Something passed between them that Thera could not read. Then he turned back to her. We will need to discuss this with our leadership. But I can tell you now that we will help. Thyra blinked in confusion. Just like that? After everything we did to your people? Maya smiled softly. Commander, we spent 200 years watching the galaxy from behind our barrier. We saw the Hollow growing. We saw worlds dying. We have been preparing for this moment since before I was born. But why? Thera asked. Why would you fight for species that abandoned you? Daniel considered the question carefully. Then he spoke words that would echo in Thyra's mind for the rest of her life. Some things are worth protecting, regardless of who asked. In the days that followed, Thyra watched humans volunteer for the mission. They lined up by the thousands, knowing they would likely die. Old soldiers came out of retirement. Young recruits begged for assignments. Scientists offered their research. Engineers prepared their ships. She attended a briefing where Daniel explained the mission to his crew. He told them the odds were terrible. He told them the enemy had never been defeated. He told them that survival was unlikely and victory was nearly impossible. Then he asked who wanted to join him. Every hand in the room went up. Thyra felt something shift inside her chest. She had called these people savages. She had feared their violence and their chaos. But standing in that room full of humans ready to die for strangers who had wronged them, she realized she had never truly understood courage until this moment. The human fleet assembled within 2 weeks. It was smaller than Thera expected, but moved with a purpose that Confederate forces had lost long ago. These ships were not flying toward defeat. They were flying toward a fight they believed they could win. On the day they departed, Daniel found Thera standing alone on an observation deck. She was watching Earth grow smaller in the distance. Having second thoughts? He asked Dot. She shook her head. I am having first thoughts. I am thinking that everything I believed about humans was wrong. Daniel stood beside her in comfortable silence. The stars stretched out before them, dotted with darkness where the hollow had already fed. We are not heroes, he said quietly. We are just stubborn. We do not know how to give up. Thyra looked at his face and saw no pride in his words. He was simply stating a fact about his species. Maybe that is exactly what the galaxy needs, she replied. Daniel smiled for the first time since she had met him. It transformed his tired face into something almost warm. Maybe it is, he agreed. Now let us go find out. The fleet jumped to faster than light speed and vanished into the stars. Behind them, Earth continued spinning in its ancient orbit. Ahead of them waited an enemy that had never known defeat. And for the first time in 300 years, the galaxy had hope. Thyra had served on many warships during her long career. She had fought beside a dozen different species and learned their customs and traditions. She thought she understood military culture. Then she came aboard the human flagship Endurance and realized she understood nothing at all. The ship was not what she expected. Confederate vessels were quiet and orderly. Crew members spoke in whispers and moved through corridors like ghosts. Every action followed protocol. Every moment was regulated and controlled. The Endurance was chaos. Humans talked constantly. They laughed in the hallways and shouted across the mess hall. They played music in the engineering sections and told jokes during maintenance shifts. They touched each other freely, clapping shoulders and shaking hands and embracing like family members rather than military personnel. They were walked through this noise and confusion with growing unease. How could these people focus on the mission ahead? How could they prepare for battle while acting like they were at a celebration? Captain Daniel Cooper had assigned her quarters near the bridge. He had also given her full access to the ship, telling her to observe whatever she wished. She took him at his word and began watching the humans closely. The first thing she noticed was the food. Confederate ships served nutrition paste designed for maximum efficiency. Humans apparently considered this unacceptable. Their mess hall offered dozens of different dishes prepared by actual cooks. Crew members gathered there not just to eat, but to talk and laugh and share stories from their lives. Thyra sat alone at a corner table and watched them. A woman with curly brown hair and oil stains on her uniform sat down across from her without asking permission. "You must be the Valorian commander," the woman said with a wide smile. "I am Chief Engineer Rosa Martinez. Welcome aboard our beautiful disaster of a ship." Thyra did not know how to respond to such an introduction. "Thank you," she managed. "Your vessel is impressive." Rosa laughed. "She is held together with tape and prayers, but she has never let us down. Are you hungry? The beef stew today is actually edible." Before Thyra could answer, Rosa had fetched her a bowl of thick brown liquid with chunks of meat and vegetables. The smell was strange but not unpleasant. Thyra tasted it carefully and found it surprisingly good. "Why do you prepare food this way?" she asked. "It must require significant resources." Rosa shrugged. "Because we are going to die soon, and everyone deserves a good meal before that happens. Also because cold nutrition paste makes people sad, and sad people fight poorly." This logic was completely foreign to everything Thyra had learned. Confederate doctrine stated that emotional attachment weakened soldiers. Comfort was a distraction from duty. Yet here was an engineer discussing death while smiling and serving stew to a stranger. "You speak of dying very casually," Thyra observed. Rosa's smile faded slightly. "Not casually. Honestly, we know what we are facing. We know most of us will not come home. But that does not mean we stop living while we are still alive." She patted Tyra's hand gently and walked away to join a group of laughing engineers. Tyra stared at her stew and wondered how a species could be so aware of death and yet so determined to enjoy every moment before it. Arrived. The next day, she visited the training deck. Here, at least, she expected to find the familiar discipline of military preparation. Instead, she found something far more disturbing. Humans were practicing close combat. Confederate forces relied on ranged weapons and strategic positioning. Physical fighting was primitive and unnecessary. But here were human soldiers throwing each other to the ground, grappling with their bare hands, striking with fists and elbows and knees. Lieutenant Maya Santos noticed her watching from the doorway. "Want to try?" Maya asked with a slight smile. Thera declined politely. "I do not understand the purpose." "Your weapons are far more effective than physical strikes." Maya nodded and led her to a viewing area. "Sometimes weapons fail. Sometimes the enemy gets close. Sometimes you have to look them in the eye and make them afraid of you. As if to demonstrate. A large Kethrani soldier entered the training area. Thyra recognized him as Vosk, a warrior from one of the Allied ships who had been loudly critical of human leadership. His species was physically superior to humans in every measurable way. Stronger, faster, more durable. Vosk approached a human officer who was practicing alone. The human was Tactical Officer Kevin Park, a lean man with patient eyes and quick hands. "I want to understand why we are following your kind into battle," Vosk declared loudly. "Show me what makes humans so special." Kevin bowed slightly. "Of course. Attack whenever you're ready." Vosk charged with the speed of his species. His claws extended, and his muscles flexed with power that could tear through metal. Kevin stepped aside. His movement was small and precise. He caught Vosk's arm as it passed and redirected the momentum. The massive Kethrani flew through the air and landed hard on the training mat. Before Vosk could rise, Kevin had moved behind him. A gentle hand rested on the back of the alien's neck. "You are very fast," Kevin said calmly. "But you announced your attack with your shoulders. You committed too much weight to your first strike. Would you like me to show you how to fix that?" Thyra expected rage. Kethrani were proud warriors who did not accept defeat gracefully. But something strange happened. Vosk looked up at the human who had beaten him so easily and saw no mockery in Kevin's eyes. He saw only the genuine offer of teaching. "Yes," Vosk said slowly. "I would like that." Kevin helped him stand and began explaining the techniques. Within an hour, they were practicing together like old training partners. By the end of the day, Vosk was eating dinner at the human table and asking questions about Earth. Thyra watched all of this with growing confusion. Humans did not conquer through force. They conquered through connection. They turned enemies into allies not by defeating them, but by respecting them. She found Daniel on the observation deck that night. He was staring out at the stars with a cup of something hot in his hands. "Your people confuse me," she admitted. "Good," he replied. "Confusion is the first step toward understanding. You were quarantined for violence," she said. "But I have seen no violence on this ship. Only kindness and laughter and strange food." Daniel turned to face her. His eyes held a sadness she had not noticed before. "We are capable of terrible violence," he said softly. "More than you can imagine. But violence is not who we are. It is what we do when we have no other choice. And even then, we never enjoy it." He looked back at the stars. 300 years ago, the galaxy pushed us into a corner. We fought because we had no other option. When the quarantine came, we could have spent 2 centuries planning revenge. Instead, we spent it preparing to help. Why? Thera asked. It was the same question she had asked on Earth, but now it meant something different. Because hatred poisons the one who carries it, Daniel said. And because we knew someday the galaxy would need us. Not to fight for ourselves, but to fight for everyone. The ship hummed around them as it carried them closer to the enemy. Thyra stood beside this strange human and felt her understanding of his species shifting. They were not monsters. They were not savages. They were simply beings who had learned that the universe was cruel and had decided to answer cruelty with stubborn, unreasonable hope. "What happens if we win?" she asked. Daniel smiled. "Then we go home and argue about what to have for dinner." Same as always. He finished his drink and walked back toward the bridge. Thyra stayed at the window and watched the stars passing by. Somewhere ahead, the hollow waited. Behind them, a galaxy held its breath, and in between, a ship full of humans laughed and sang and prepared to fight for strangers who had once been their enemies. Thyra did not understand them yet, but she was beginning to think that maybe understanding was not necessary. Maybe faith was enough.